All right, let's talk about India. There's a new bill on the table that's causing an absolute political firestorm. And get this, it could fundamentally change how power works in the world's largest democracy.
Now, the opposition isn't holding back. They're calling this a super emergency. Yeah, you heard that right. They're comparing it to one of the darkest chapters in India's democratic history. So you've got to ask, what could a law possibly do to get a label that intense?
Okay, so the bill at the center of all this is officially called the 130th Constitutional Amendment Bill. Let's peel back the layers and get right into what it actually says, and more importantly, why it has everyone so fired up.
So at its core, this whole thing boils down to something called the 30-day rule. It sounds simple, but trust me, it's a really powerful new idea for how to handle senior politicians who get into legal trouble.
So here's the breakdown. Imagine a high-level minister gets arrested for a pretty serious crime, something that could land them in jail for 5 years or more. Now, if they're stuck in jail for over 30 days and can't get bail, boom, on day 31, they automatically lose their job. Just like that, no ifs, ands, or buts.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This rule doesn't apply to just any politician. It's super specific. We're talking about the big jobs, the prime minister, the chief ministers of states, and all their cabinet ministers. Regular members of parliament or state legislatures? Nope, they're not included. This is all about the executive branch.
So, you're probably wondering, why is the government pushing for this? What's their side of the story? Well, their whole argument really hangs on one idea. They say it's about restoring political morality.
The official line is that this is all about protecting the integrity of the office. The logic is simple. You just can't have someone running a government from a jail cell. They argue it destroys public trust and, could let that person mess with the investigation against them.
And to make their case, they're looking back to a time when leaders would step down just based on allegations, to maintain a high ethical standard. They're drawing a sharp contrast with what just happened with Delhi's chief minister, Arvind Kejriwal, who kept his job while he was in jail. For the government, that's Exhibit A for why this law is an absolute must.
Okay, but let's flip the coin. The opposition sees this, well, completely differently. For them, this has nothing to do with morality. They see it as a political weapon, plain and simple, designed to take out their opponents.
So here are their biggest worries. First, they're concerned the ruling party could use powerful federal agencies, we're talking about the ED and the CBI, to target opposition leaders with bogus cases. Second, and this is a big one, India's justice system can be really slow. So keeping someone in jail for 30 days without bail, that's not that hard to do. They're saying this completely ignores the whole innocent until proven guilty idea and basically hands the central government a way to overthrow state governments run by the opposition.
And that right there, that's the central conflict. Is this a much-needed tool to clean up politics, like the government says, or is it a dangerous weapon that threatens democracy itself, as the opposition is screaming from the rooftops?
So with these two sides so dug in, you've got to wonder, what happens now? Is there any way this bill actually moves forward? Well, for the moment, the bill's hit the pause button. It's been sent to what's called a joint parliamentary committee. Think of it as a timeout, where members from all the different parties can get together, really dig into the details, and figure out the implications.
But here's the real hurdle, getting it passed into law. Because this is a constitutional amendment, it needs what's called a special majority. That's a super high bar. We're talking 2/3 of the members who show up and vote. Right now, the ruling coalition just doesn't have those numbers on its own. Bottom line, they need some help from the opposition to get this done.
And that's where we might see a path to a compromise. It all comes down to the massive difference between two little words. The first is accusation, which is just that, an unproven claim that somebody did something wrong. But then there's the other word.
And that's conviction. That's a formal, official declaration from a court after a trial that someone is actually guilty. And this is the key. The opposition seems to be saying, hey, we might get on board with this, but only if that 30-day clock starts after a conviction, not just an arrest based on an accusation.
You see? That one little tweak would change everything. It would take the power out of the hands of investigators and put it squarely with the courts. So it brings us right back to that final, critical question. Is this a necessary reform to clean up the system, or a dangerous political tool? The final version of this bill, if it ever sees the light of day, is going to tell us the answer.